Hello there, pseudo-skeptics. Call yourself skeptic, suit yourself. Steve here in Sydney. I've got something for you. I'm going to talk about how you got to be a skeptic, how often it's trauma-based or some kind of developmental problem. Then I'm going to give an example of why you are that way, that manifests daily all over the internet. And it goes like this. Pseudo-skeptics, for some reason, their minds don't change from being photographic and literal as the normal person is under the age of 12. Puberty hormones are supposed to reconstruct your brain, re-architect it, modify it so that you start to think metaphorically rather than literally. And you start to become critical, and you also notice what's missing in accounts of things, instead of focusing entirely on the utter believability of what's put in front of you, which is what the more infantile, literal photographic mind of children do. Now, another feature of pseudo-skeptics is narcissism, which is the opposite of empathy. They utterly lack it, and you often feel like when they're talking to you, they're talking to someone else, because they're carrying a sort of a template they've constructed of their favourite opponent with well-rehearsed arguments, and they just keep projecting them onto everyone they meet. It was happening to me today, and I was actually telling a skeptic that you're talking to someone else in your own head. You're not talking to an average person. You haven't even bothered to find out what we do over here. So it looks like hormones don't trigger the growth from the photographic literal mind into the mind the average teenager has, which is much more metaphor-based and actually naturally more skeptical, as it needs to be, because skeptics remain gullible even when they become skeptics. What they actually do is, sooner or later, their gullibility leads them into having to face how gullible they have been when they believe something such as Santa Claus, or it takes them a lot longer than other people to realise that religions are just a whole lot of stories, and they stare at themselves aghast. And it can be done by James Randi, who tells you you're an idiot for believing all that stuff. And so what you do is, you don't change physiologically, you remain gullible as you were, but you become, rather than a gullible believer in anything put in front of you, you become a gullible believer in nothing, except the words of James Randi. So you're still just as gullible as ever. Now, I'm going to give you an example of this and the complete suspension of critical thought, because they still have the infantile mindset in the head of the skeptic. The photographic, literal, unquestioning mind. And it goes like this. We do have people all the time, skeptics say this with gay abandon, dare I use that little pun there. Cold reading explains mediumship, clairvoyance, psychics, etc. This is probably written 100,000 times daily all over the internet. I get it thrown at me all the time by people who believe I'm religious, which I'm not. I'm not even a Christian, never was, never will be. But people are always telling me that anyone playing medium is really just cold reading, you see. So I'm going to put a proposition to you, dear skeptics, about mediumship being done via cold reading. I'm going to say this to you guys. Skeptics, cold reading has been discredited. Scientifically, it's been studied very seriously, because if it did exist, it would be incredibly valuable. It would be a wonderful discovery. And so it's been looked at very seriously, and one person in particular, James Randi, failed dismally. He simply cannot do it. Now, if you just think for a minute, which skeptics are very much averse to, this has been said by some very well-informed people, if you just think for a minute, if cold reading existed and it could elicit information from people simply via their body language, there'd be great employment for them by the police. They would love to be able to find out information from people via cold reading, wouldn't they? It would complement the polygraph test wonderfully well, wouldn't it? Guantanamo Bay waterboarding of prisoners' interrogation would be revolutionised by the simple act of cold reading them. Right? School principals, school teachers would just love to be able to cold read their pupils and find out who did what. Who's lying, who's not sort of telling the truth, that sort of thing. So there's a whole host of other people like private detectives who could greatly use the results of a skilled cold reader, okay, eliciting information simply by looking at the body language of people. Now, if cold reading did exist, and it doesn't, because I know that we all know it exists purely in the minds, the imaginations of these literal-minded, infantile-minded pseudo-skeptics that subscribe to James Randi. If cold reading really existed, you'd be able to find them in the business section of the phone book. So all you have to do to debunk this claim, skeptics, is show me the cold readers in the business pages of your local online phone book. Because they would make a fortune cold reading people, wouldn't they? Just think about it. What couldn't you find out with a skilled cold reader? And most of all, the most talented people who make all these claims, skeptics groups, skeptics clubs, could form little cold reading companies and become millionaires overnight, couldn't they? By just eliciting information from people's body language and gestures. Because that'd be the truth, wouldn't it? I mean, if it really existed. So let's hear it from you skeptics. Show me some copies and pastes from phone books all over the world where cold readers are making a fortune, eliciting information secretly from people via their body language and their gestures and their intonation and their eye contact and all that clever, witty stuff. I'm afraid you're not going to find it, skeptics. You're not going to find it, and it's a delusion. It's an infantile delusion believing that all these things could be true. I mean, why don't we ever hear of former FBI cold readers, CIA cold readers who suddenly go freelance and able to read politicians off the TV and stuff like that? Why don't we hear about them? Why don't we hear about them? Because cold reading is a load of hogwash. It's a fairy tale believed only by gullible skeptics who are gullible to start with and are equally gullible when they decide to believe only James Randi and what he tells them and not think anymore, because they've still got the gullibility problem of the infantile photographic mind. So I'll believe otherwise when you can show me professional cold readers in the business sections of phone books online from all over the world. So how's that for a challenge, guys? See you next time.